Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining for a new edition of this podcast. I'm joined today by Sean Han from Aspect. And Aspect is an NFT marketplace that recently launched on Starknet. You actually launched this week, right, Sean?
Yes, we launched on mainnet yesterday on Monday.
So were you excited?
Yeah, super excited. We've been on testnet for almost half a year now, so
Yeah.
It's a huge milestone to finally be on mainnet.
It's great. And it also comes at the right time because there are a bunch of NFTs on mainnet, right, that were
Yes.
minted and people can now interact with them.
Yes, for sure. And I think it's also a sort of vote of confidence, I think, for the NFT community as well. Because I think even though there are a lot of NFTs being minted on mainnet, there's the majority of them are still on testnet and still sort of waiting. So hopefully, like by us going on mainnet, it also encourages other projects on testnet to also explore going on mainnet as well.
You know, I think a marketplace or a place to see your NFTs, browse them, and exchange them is a key piece of infrastructure. Half the fun of NFTs and collectibles is showing them and trading them. So I think it will enable this for sure.
Absolutely. And I think like that was exactly our thinking as well, right? Like when we first joined the ecosystem, maybe we can go into that a bit later, but we were exploring like what we wanted to build on Starknet. And I think there are always like the primitives, right, of every ecosystem. For example, every ecosystem sort of needs an oracle, right? They all need wallets, they all need AMMs, right? And they need NFT marketplaces. So I think those are usually the first steps to be built in every new ecosystem. And then typically you see sort of the more nuanced and newer things after those like fundamental apps get built.
Yeah, pretty cool. It's part of the roads. So yeah, can you talk? Can you tell us a bit about yourself? What's your background story? Where did you grow up, and what did you study initially?
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, like Henri mentioned in the beginning, my name is Sean, and I first heard about crypto in 2013, and then at that time I was a first year university student at the University of Toronto. My background was in business and computer science, and I think naturally finding out Bitcoin about that time, it sort of aligned with what I was studying.
How did you hear about it?
Just on the news, because like I think that was the first like really big bull run that like sort of got some mainstream attention in 2013, right? I think it was the first time Bitcoin reached $1,000 and like quickly crashed after that. And I think like because I was in the finance program, like within our students, we were talking about it as well. So I think that's really how I got exposed for the first time.
And when did you start looking at it? Like, so you started with a financial angle. When did you started looking at it from a technical angle?
Yeah, exactly. So I think in 2013, I started mainly as a business student. So I didn't really have the skills yet to look at it from a technical angle. And then throughout my university years, I slowly switched my undergraduate degree to a more computer science focus. And then sort of when in 2017, when there was a second bull run, at that time I was doing an internship at a big tech company as an engineer. And then that's when I really started digging in from a technical perspective, because I already had 3 years of university experience and also 1 year of internship experience. So I think that's when I really was well positioned to learn crypto in general from a more technical standpoint. And I think that was in 2017 was really how I really got involved in the crypto space.
Did you start with Bitcoin or Ethereum?
Mostly Bitcoin. Yeah, I was mostly reading the Bitcoin white paper, understanding the blockchain architecture from a very fundamental level. At that time, I was doing a lot of open source projects as well. Like I launched something called a blockchain CLI, which basically you can visualize the blockchain architecture in JavaScript in like 300 lines of code, and you also have a CLI so you can interact with it. And then that was mostly based on proof of work, so mostly off the Bitcoin architecture. And then when I open sourced that, a lot of people found that interesting, and then that's when I thought, okay, maybe I can make a web app that can visualize that for average users, right? Not just developers. And then that's when I created a program called a blockchaindemo.io. Basically, it visualizes the whole blockchain architecture, right? And then you can see like the longest chain, you can see proof of work in action, you can see like the peer-to-peer network, you can see how it's immutable. So it's a very visual sort of learning tool. And I think that's when I sort of launched it publicly, and it got a lot of traction on a website called Product Hunt, which is like where a lot of startups launch
Yeah.
their startups, and then it's like the second most upvoted crypto product on Product Hunt, I think, after Robinhood Crypto.
Wow,
And then
that's an impressive feat.
yeah, thank you. And that's when I really became like I guess ingrained in the crypto ecosystem.
But how did you get this idea of, hey, let me visualize the blockchain in a like with a CLI or a website? Was it a learning tool for you,
Yeah,
or
it
was
was
it
a
just,
learning tool for me as well, right? Because for me, the easiest way to learn something is to build it. So I tried to build my own blockchain, right? And after I learned to build my own blockchain. Like, how can I share it with others? And then the CLI tool was a way for me to share my
did you have
learning.
a name for your own blockchain?
No, it's just called blockchain CLI, and then the website was just blockchain demo. Yeah, because that blockchain is
Oh, so it was a specific blockchain. It was not an explainer on what Bitcoin is or what Ethereum is. It was a specific blockchain that you designed and you showed how it works.
yes, exactly. But
Super cool.
it was based on Bitcoin, right? But my implementation was super naive, so not ready for production at all, but more like very simplified, so very easy to digest.
So it's funny. It sounds like something you started tinkering and then it kind of caught up and was published on Product Hunt. So what happened at that point?
Yeah, exactly. So it really just started with a side project, like I was just learning, and then when I started publishing my work, that's when things started to get um, to get I guess, bigger exposure. Because at that time, I think, and even in 2017, like there was a lot of ICOs at that time, right? And I think people were very curious about blockchains and Bitcoin in general. So I think maybe that was a good timing as well, because a lot of people were buying the ICOs, but really they didn't understand as much the technology behind it. So I think that's how really I got started, and then that's also when I got learned about startups as well, right? Like after I started publishing my work, investors started reaching out to me, and that's how I started talking to them and learned about. I didn't even know what a startup was or what angel investors were or what VCs were, right? So it was the first time I really got exposed to that, and I think that also helped me learn a lot for what I'm doing now at Aspect.
Cool. So after that, did you let the project on the side? Did you start a new venture? You were
Yeah,
still a student, or were you working
yeah.
already at that time?
I was a student, so I was like that was when I was after my third year, and then so in Canada, a lot of students do a 1 year internship
Mhm.
after their third year of university. So I just finished my 1 year internship, and then I was going to my fourth year of college in 2018. So after that, I was just studying. Right, like crypto crashed in 2018, so I just went back to school to finish my studies, and then yeah. Also something to mention in 2017, I was when I was building these visualizations. That's when I got in contact with the Ethereum Foundation through my school as well, and then that's how I got involved with working out of their office. And then that's when I got exposed to NFTs actually for the first time. And that was like even before CryptoKitties in like mid to late 2017. A bunch of students also at the Ethereum Foundation, they were building a marketplace only for CryptoPunks. And then that was like the first marketplace I think ever, right? And then it only traded CryptoPunks, and CryptoPunks were basically free at that time.
Yeah, I remember that fun period of time. The CryptoPunks were free, and then all of a sudden they were worth like $10, and I was thinking, like, who would pay $10 for an image?
That's exactly what I thought,
And
right?
then things escalated.
Exactly. Like they were showing me like a CryptoPunk in the marketplace. I'm like, who would buy this 8-bit avatar, right? And then yeah, and then a couple months after, like CryptoKitties launched, and I think that's when
I mean, I remember thinking the CryptoPunks projects was really interesting. Like it really that's something I really liked about it. Like it's an artistic endeavor that really showed something new you could do with the blockchain. It was like, hey, you could do that, and it might make sense, and it did make sense, right?
Yes, yes,
But it's funny really to see like, oh yeah, it sort of makes sense. Still, I wouldn't pay money for it, right? You can have you have this thing where you have both opinions at the same time in your
yeah,
brain, and yeah, CryptoKitties arrived and it changed the whole thing.
yeah. And I think what I really missed at that point was the generalization of NFTs, right? The standardization and generalization. Like when I saw CryptoPunks, I thought there was only going to be like each individual collections, right? I didn't think there would be like a whole ERC 721 standard or a 1155 standard that I think really opened up the whole space. Because like you said, when I saw CryptoPunk, I didn't think it was so artistically appealing. And even when I saw CryptoKitties, I thought it would be its own like siloed ecosystem, right? And if you look at other bull cycles, like even in 2017, when they sort of standardized the ERC20 standard, the token standard, that's when a lot of projects started launching their own tokens, right? And then I think in 2018 was when they standardized ERC 721. And then in 2020, I think 1155. And then after that, everyone could start launching the NFTs that follow the standard. And I think that really brought like composability and a lot of value into these ecosystems, right? Because when everyone follows the ERC20 standard, you could build things like Uniswap that allows exchange of these tokens that follow the same standard, right? And after you have standardization of NFTs, you have like marketplaces like OpenSea that can pick up all of these 721s and allow people to trade freely among them. So I think it was really the standardization and the generalization of NFTs and tokens that really opened up the whole space.
Yeah, definitely. I think another underrated thing that CryptoKitties brought, and specifically CryptoKitties, not CryptoPunks, because I remember to interact with CryptoPunks, you basically had to have Mist, the browser on top of the get node. You would have to copy paste the ABI inside of it, and then the functions would appear. It was super clunky and hard to use, right? But what blew my mind with CryptoKitties is that you would get on a web page that was like a regular website and have an easy connection with MetaMask, and you could do your transactions in browser. Of course,
Yeah,
MetaMask is not as safe as having your hardware wallet or your own node, but still, like it made, I think for a lot of people, it made smart contracts tangible because it was like, oh yeah, you could have a website, but the backend works as a smart contract and the value is actually locked there. And I think that, I think CryptoKitties is really one of the first dApps I saw in a Chrome browser, and that a lot of them followed afterwards.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was really like you said, that was really the first app I think that was in a website that interacts with the browser that worked very well, right? Because that was even before like the whole DeFi summer, before Uniswap. So
Mm.
I think yeah, exactly. Because I remember being at the first Ethereum hackathon at ETH Waterloo, and a lot of people were trying to build dApps, but they were always, like you said, very clunky, right? The UI UX wasn't very good. And then I think like CryptoKitties was really one that was more consumer friendly than any other dApp that was sort of being built at the time.
Yeah, for sure. So you worked a bit with the Ethereum Foundation, at the Ethereum Foundation's office while finishing your studies, and then what?
Yeah, and then I graduated, and then like COVID happened, so I was like moving around at that time, and then
Moving around during COVID, it was a hard thing to do.
yeah, yeah, like I moved, I actually moved to China to visit my family in December of 2020, and then COVID broke out in January of 2021 in China, and then
2020.
was it 2020?
It
Yeah,
was
yeah, 2020.
2020.
Yeah. So I moved back in December 2019, and then COVID broke out there in January of 2020. So I was like stuck there for a bit, and
For
then
a bit, dude, it must have lasted months, right?
yeah,
Right?
yeah, there for like a year, I think. So yeah,
Wow,
for a
that must
long
have been
time.
an intense experience.
Yeah, it was not too bad because like I graduated and then I haven't been with family for a while because I was in Canada. So it was a good time to sort of take a break and relax. And then I think in 2021 was when I saw like the NFT, like January of 2021, I saw the whole NFT craze and I was back to tinkering again, trying to build products in the NFT space. Because for me, like I think what really excites me is consumer products.
Hmm.
I think that's why during that period after 2017, I wasn't as interested in the whole DeFi ecosystem because to me, DeFi is more like finding yield, right? Like looking at numbers going up. But to me, things like NFTs, it's a lot more consumer, right? Because it's like cultural, it's very community based. It's
It's
also very
funnier.
cool. Yeah, it's very fun, like you said. So I think when I saw NFTs in like late 2020 and early 2021, that got me really excited again. And
Which
then,
project specifically did you really like?
so I was mostly looking at OpenSea, like,
Hmm.
and then yeah, so what I saw OpenSea, and then that's when I built a sort of NFT sales ranking website that ranks the top sales for by day, by week, by month, and then all time. And then literally the day I put that website live, it was the day like Bored Ape started minting, and my whole website was filled with Bored Apes. And they were selling at, I think right after mint, they were selling at 1 ETH on OpenSea. And then yeah, I think that started the whole bull run of NFTs. And then yeah, I started participating as well. Like I bought some of the earlier projects in 2021. And it was so different at that time because there was so much more demand than supply. Literally, if you were on Twitter and then you saw any NFT project started minting, the day after it sells out, it would start like 3x or 4x because like there were so little projects, but so many people on Twitter like very excited about NFTs.
Do,
Obviously, it's like, very different nowadays.
do you think it was because of do you think it was all speculation, or was there also excitement about the possibilities opened by this by NFTs?
Um, I would say it is mostly speculation because I think like CryptoPunks was like the first 10K, right? And then I think Bored Ape was like the first 10K that actually looked good as well. And like sort of hit the consumer radar, right? And then everyone else just started copying Bored Apes, but with different animals essentially. So I think like yeah, I think it was mostly speculation, but also people were excited about the possibilities of what NFTs were, right? Because before it was like like when people thought of 10K PFPs, it was like CryptoPunks, which was like 8-bit, and then I think Bored Apes really started the whole trend of like NFTs that looked good and also like 10K with different attributes. Yeah,
Nice.
like it really reminds me of like the 2017 ICO, right? Like people were just launching a lot of token projects at that time. And then I think, like, I hope in the coming years, people add more utility to those tokens that were being launched. Like after 2017, people like DeFi summer started, right? And people were trying to add more utility for these tokens on Ethereum. And I hope the same would happen in the coming years for NFTs. People add more utility to NFTs. I think we are seeing that, but I think it's not at the pace that we would like. Like because they sold so much, the expectations are very high, and I feel like the expectations would probably never reach that point. But I guess we'll see, right? Because
But the parallel you're making between 2017 and ICO mania is, I think, very relevant. You're right. There were a lot of projects launching their token in 2017, and for the past almost 2 years following after that,
yeah,
tokens were kind of like a bad word. Like if you
yes,
were talking about having a token, it was like at some events it was even kind of looked upon. It was like, no, we don't want to hear about your tokens, or tokens are scams or something like that. And then gradually it came back, and people actually thought like, maybe this is an interesting mechanism we can play with,
yeah,
and now it's less exuberant as it used to be, but there's still experimentation coming back with it. And I
yes,
think I agree with you. I think that for the NFT world, we reached the equivalent of ICO mania with so many projects launching so many stuff. And yeah, winters and disillusions and periods of trough can be a bit tough, but projects that make it on the other side are innovators that manage to find interesting stuff,
Yeah.
will for sure manage to create value.
Yeah. Really.
So, and you know, you're obviously biased because you're building an NFT marketplace, but I'm curious to hear about. So you mentioned a bit before that it was part of the basic infrastructure you saw a need for Starknet.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit? How did you end up actually doing this? Did you
Yeah.
experiment with various ecosystems? So you went to Ethereum. Did you build elsewhere also?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think in January of 2021 was when I was sort of experimenting with NFTs. Like I said, I built like a whole NFT sales ranking, right? And then the first day, like it was all Bored Apes, and then shortly after that, I like COVID was dying down, right? And it was sort of more stabilized in China, and then that's when I sort of joined blockchain.com as an engineer, and then I came back to Canada to work for them. And then for blockchain.com, when I was working there, like blockchain.com, I think was one of the first crypto companies ever, right?
Yeah.
Like they started in 2011, and then that was like even a couple years before Coinbase. And the company, I think, is traditionally more Bitcoin focused than any other ecosystem just because they were so early, right? And then I think there was a crazy stat like 30% of Bitcoin transactions go through like the blockchain.com, right? So I think like, but when I joined, I was experimenting a lot with NFTs and things like that, and I think the company itself was realizing that the whole Web3 ecosystem was sort of growing really fast, and the company was sort of exploring how to better support Ethereum in our products. And I was on the team to sort of do that exploration around the Ethereum ecosystem. And we were mostly looking at like how can we better support, you know, at that time it was like mostly side chains, right? Like Polygon and also optimistic rollups, maybe with Optimism and Arbitrum, and how we can better support that into our wallet, right? Like maybe able to get like token balances of all your ERC20 tokens inside your blockchain.com wallet. And then that's when I was doing the exploration, right? I was looking at like sidechains, Polygon, and then optimistic rollups. And then somehow I stumbled into ZK rollups as well. And I think like what I read about it got me really excited.
What do you mean it got you excited? Like
Yeah.
what got you excited? The ZK part, the
So it's mostly, I think, the UX, right? Because for me, it's always about like building for mass consumers. And I think the bridging experience for ZK rollups, from what I've read, looked better. Because like when you bridge from layer 2 to layer 1, if you're in an optimistic rollup ecosystem, it could take 1 to 2 weeks unless you use some sort of derivative like synthetics or something. But even
that works for tokens, doesn't work for NFT that much.
Yes. And even then, the experience might not be the best. So I think that's what attracted me to ZK rollups, just the UX part, right? Like if I want to bridge from layer 2 to layer 1, it's almost instant compared to waiting 2 weeks. So I just thought that would probably be better for users if they want to bridge back and forth. So I think that's when I started looking at the ZK rollup ecosystem. And I think like obviously the two big players was ZK Sync and Starknet. And I think when I first joined, I even posted in the Starknet channel about ZK Sync, like, oh, which one should I look at? Right. And then I think for an individual developer like myself, it was a no-brainer to look at the Starknet ecosystem at that time. Because ZK Sync, they only work with the big companies. They only partner with the big companies. And I think as an individual developer, I couldn't even use their platform in mid 2021. But Starknet was already available for any developer to tinker with, right? So
it's funny you're saying that because it was open, but it was rough, right? It's not like you could do a lot of things, and the tooling is still needs to get better. But at that time, like it must have been.
it was available, right? That was it was available, but it was rough, but it was available, right?
It was working.
Yes, it was working. It was working. But with ZK Sync, it wasn't even available, so I had no choice but to just use Starknet, right? And I think at that time there was like 5 developers. That was like Guilty Gills are obviously one of them. That was like really participating in the Starknet ecosystem. Obviously, this has changed dramatically now, but it was very exciting. I think at that time to sort of be one of the early developers in such a big ecosystem now.
Yeah,
And
and you're right that when you're in a smaller ecosystem like this, in a way it's harder to get answers because things are less documented. But in a way, it's easier because if you go ask for help,
yes,
usually people are more receptive. They have more time, and you have when there's 5 developers for a team of builders for the network, builders of the network have more time for the 5 developers. So I guess it helped a lot.
exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it was very collaborative. I remember asking any question, right? Parama was there also answering a lot of questions. And yeah, like people like Parama really, really helped me. I think get familiar with the Starknet ecosystem. Like to me, his blogs alongside the Caro documentation was like the Bibles of
Yeah.
the Starknet ecosystem to me. So yeah, somehow I just got very yeah, like I wanted to see what a scalable blockchain could do, because I really think like it has potential to onboard, mass consumers. So I think when I found the Starknet ecosystem, it was like, like getting obsessed when I was learning about Bitcoin. Like I was reading the Chiral docs like every day. And then I remember I even like dreamed about scaling blockchain at one point because I was just reading the Chiral docs so much. And then
Yeah, but it's not like there were a lot of documentation either.
yeah, there wasn't a lot, but for me, I'm mostly a front end engineer. So for
Mhm.
me, reading things that are more, lower level just took a little bit more time for me.
Oh yeah,
And
for sure.
yeah, and then I was looking at like what can I build right on Starknet? That was my first thing.
And
Like
how
what
did you do? Because as a front end engineer, there weren't even like, yeah, you came up with Starknet JS. So it's it's not like you could have used it before. But
yeah,
like, did you start writing smart contract, or did you say, hey, how do I build front end?
yeah, exactly. So I never wrote any smart contract code before. Like I always worked with my co-founder Jonathan, and he typically does all the backend and infrastructure stuff. And I never wrote smart contract code before writing Cairo. So Cairo was actually my real like smart because even though I was very involved with the Ethereum ecosystem, I just didn't think that UX was good enough for me to feel motivated to really build a full dApp in Ethereum, right? But I think Starknet really had the potential where I was very interested in learning to write like smart contracts and building a full application.
Oh, that's interesting. So wait, you mean that you don't see a way for an app on Ethereum to have a nice UX period, or you see a much higher potential on Starknet? How come? Is it because of account abstractions or account abstraction or something else?
I
It's
think
usually what come up in when I hear this, but
Yeah, I think now I feel less about it now because of the dApps, the really big dApps now on
yeah.
Ethereum, like Uniswap and OpenSea. But I think
Hmm.
in 2017, I sort of saw the apps people were building and they were super rough, and I saw people use MetaMask and try to sign and pay gas. I was like, I don't know if like my friend from business school would want to use this,
Yeah.
I think I change a lot of like nowadays, right? Things have matured and improved a lot. But even then, even like in 2021, I thought like gas was a huge problem, right? Because like in the mid 2021, NFT was growing like crazy, and I think people were paying like $50 in gas.
Yeah,
And
and $50 was for what? Just for transferring ETH, buying an NFT, minting one, making a Uniswap trade. There were periods where you would pay various
yeah,
hundreds of dollars any time of the day or the night.
yeah, $50 is actually cheap. Like a lot of times you're looking at like hundreds, like you said, 200. So I think it was mostly that, right? Because when I was very excited about Striker because I was like, how can I build something that's UX wise was better? And I think gas fees in 2021 was a big part of that, right? Because I don't think average people would want to pay $50 to make a transaction.
Yep.
So the first thing when I joined Starknet is like, what app can I build on Starknet, right? App can I build on such a scalable blockchain? And then I think like when I wanted to build an app, I realized I couldn't really talk to the network. Like I wrote like a website, but I realized my website couldn't talk to the network in a very easy way. So that's when I started StarkNet.js. It was mostly to dog feed my own apps that I was building so that I could actually talk to the StarkNet network. And that's how I started working on StarkNet.js.
So one of the major, I mean, if not the major, most used library today for starting, you started it out of necessity.
Yes, yes, it's definitely a necessity. I never sought out to build StarkNet.js. It was more like I needed a way to talk to the network, and why don't I just abstract this and use my own library? And
And when you did that, did you start with like, is it really hard? I think when you're designing this kind of stuff, you can start with tinkering. Oh, I need this info, so I'm going to make something that is very ad hoc. And at which point did you think, wait, this may be used by other people. Let's make this more generic. And let's maybe look at specs from other Web3 libraries.
yeah, so I think in the beginning I just needed API endpoints to talk to the the centralized Starknet sequencer owned by Starkware. And then that wasn't too difficult. Like obviously I could have just made StarkNet.js use the endpoints that my app would use, but I was reading the code from like Chiral Lang and there wasn't that many endpoints. So I was like, okay, might as well just convert all these endpoints into JavaScript. So I just open sourced that implementation where we're calling all these endpoints to the StarkNet sequencer. And then I think most of the other efforts around like the more general stuff was done by Argent and specifically Yannick and also Shard Labs is leading those efforts.
So when did you reach out? When did you get in touch with them?
So I didn't get in touch with them. They just sort of they were like, okay, cool. There's a JavaScript library. Let me contribute to the library.
So the interact is just through commits. They didn't call or say, "Hey, hi, can we
through
work together?"
Discord, in Discord because like StarkNet community was on Discord at that time, so it was mostly like, hey, like let me add these things to the library, and I was like, cool. And then it was mostly through Discord that we communicated and collaborated on StarkNet.js.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And so with that, you started Aspect. Did you initially start with an NFT marketplace, or did you try something else?
Yeah. So actually, like, I think there was an AMM example on
Yeah.
uh, in the in the Cairo documentation. So I initially deployed that one with StarkNet.js and the front end I wrote. And I was like so shocked at that point because I remember when I deployed that dApp, everything was instant, like literally like sub-second finality. And I think maybe like outside of the Cairo docs, I was probably the only dApp on StarkNet testnet at that time. And I was like, oh my gosh, this has to be the future, right? Because it had the same experience of like DYDX. And like to me, DYDX has some of the best UX in the whole crypto space. Like instant finality, right? Like almost no gas. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the future of crypto. And then obviously, I think like as the ecosystem grew, things started to slow down. And I think like there was, um, yeah, like things like there was a lot more transactions on Starknet, and I think things started to slow down a little bit. But I think like when I first initially launched my first dApp on Starknet, I was like completely sold, you know, because it was so amazing, like everything instant, like no gas fees. It was like I was like so surprised and very impressed at that time. And I think like yeah, when I was exploring what to build on Starknet, I think because I already started building apps in NFTs in early 2021 and I saw like the whole ecosystem grow so rapidly, I think like building an NFT marketplace to what I think will ultimately scale Ethereum was like what I wanted to build.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Nice. So, question for you. So, you've been in the space for a relatively long time, like
Yeah.
a bit more than a year, which is like more than most people, I would say. Um, what did you see like in a given like in the past year? What did you see change for the good, for the bad? What were the main thing you think have
Yeah.
changed?
So I think like when I first joined in mid to late 2021, obviously there was only a handful of developers, right? And now we have like there's so many we can't even keep track. And I think that growth has been extremely exciting. I think obviously probably shared with Starkware as well how excited we were because in the beginning we all knew each other, but now like has grown so fast that even us we can't keep track, right? Because before we every time we saw a new project launch, we would all be really excited, and we were like, oh yeah, look at these guys. But now like there's so many we can't even like keep track of everyone. So I think definitely the number of developers has increased exponentially from before. I think some of the more challenges were like the scaling problems. I think as we saw more developers being engaged. When I first did the dev, like I said, it was like instant find out, like accepted on L2 instantly, and now I think like um, now we're thinking about like how do we scale and how do we decentralize, right from Starcore's point of view. So I think there are some growing pains as the ecosystem gets bigger and bigger. And
I think this will be solved. I mean, this will be solved. Scaling
yeah,
is a moving target always, and the more capacity you free up, the more demand will come and push it forward.
for sure.
So, but still, I think I agree with you. The network needs to get better, and we have good ideas on how it can be made better.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have no doubt as well that Starkware will figure it out. So yeah, and we're very excited about the developer activity on Starknet. So yeah.
Very cool. Are there a specific project or specific ideas you'd like to see developed on Starknet, or you're curious about? Like, there's always this frustrating thing when you're building on a new platform that there's so many possibilities and you have to stick to one because
Yeah.
otherwise you never get anywhere. But are
Yeah.
there other fields of experimentation you're curious about and you think like, oh, I'd like to see things happen in that
For sure.
regard?
We are experimenting a lot internally as well. But like you said, we're very focused on the NFT marketplace. But in terms of experimentation, I think there's so many possibilities around like, and I think a lot of the ecosystem is experimenting with this as well around like on-chain gaming. Um, yeah, and we've experimented a lot around on-chain gaming as well. So I think that's super exciting. Um, yeah, I think we were also thinking about like because it seems computation is cheaper and storage is more expensive. Pushing the limits of what we can do with storage is something we've experimented with. But yeah, we're very excited about like building worlds on top of Starknet, and those are some of the things that we've sort of tried and experimented.
Building worlds? What do you mean?
Like like things like bricks, I think is sort
Yeah.
of a good sort of thought exercise around that, right? Like people building like these Lego tools. And then we sort of thought about how can we bring sort of these bricks in a shared experience where people can like interact with each other, maybe sort of like Minecraft or things like that. So I think that's very exciting.
Is it something you say we? Is it you aspect or is it you aspect and brick?
So like we do talk a lot about our project. So a lot of it is internal, but some is also like collaborative as well.
Very nice. Um, I think like most people who started with crypto started behind a screen, right? You probably heard about it. Maybe you mentioned on the news or through a computer, and you learned about it probably behind your computer.
Yeah.
And then at some point, probably you say, hey, maybe let's go to a meetup or maybe let's go to a conference. What were your first in real life uh,
Yeah.
encounters with the community? What was it like?
For sure. So I think the earliest was probably like 2017 at ETH Waterloo, right?
Hmm.
The first hackathon. But even then, like at that time, I was mostly building around the blockchain architecture, less around DApps on Ethereum, like smart contracts. Just because, like I said before, I didn't think the UX would be good enough for average consumers to use it. And I think like after
So
that, yeah,
if Waterloo was a big hackathon, right?
yes, it was huge. It was
So,
huge.
I mean, like, did you think, okay, let's go there? What kind of people did you meet there? What were you expecting to see? Just cypherpunks or?
Um, because at the time I was a student, right? So I
Mhm.
was meeting a lot of other students, but obviously there's like the celebrities that were there, like Vitalik was there, and like anytime he went anywhere, he was like surrounded by a big group of people. But I think at that time, like like very different characters than what we've seen now. I think, right? Like very cyberpunk, like you said. Some of the very early investors were also there. But I think very different from the people we see now. Like, I don't think I've seen like there was a lot of DeFi people or NFT people at that time. It was just I don't even know honestly what people were building in 2017. It was just like really random apps that didn't have the best user experience. I really think like in 20 like DeFi summer and then NFT winter was really when people started building more consumer applications.
Very nice. And with the Starknet community, when was the first time you actually met in person with people from Starknet?
Them at Dev Connect. Yeah. So I think after 2017, I sort of took a hiatus. Right, I didn't really get involved, but I think I got involved again in 2021. 2022 with Amsterdam, and also like with my company with blockchain.com, we had get-togethers, and then we went to Miami. Also, there was a big, I think it was Art Basel was there.
Yep.
I went to see like a lot of NFT collections at that time, like seeing the NFT scene, in person NFT scene. So that was really interesting. And obviously
cool.
meeting all the Starknet community in Amsterdam, that was really a blast because we were mostly communicating and collaborating over Discord, over Telegram, and it was really great to meet everyone in person. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a fun experience.
Yeah.
And kind of a follow-up on that question, but so you launched Aspect earlier this week. You're based in Toronto, and you mentioned your co-founder, Jonathan. Where is he based?
Yeah, so Jonathan was in San Francisco, and then he left San Francisco to join me in Toronto to work on Aspect.
Do you guys work from the same place or remotely?
We're both in Toronto, and we're like 30 minutes away, but we work remotely. We don't have an office or anything. But sometimes I visit him, he visits me. So sometimes we will work in person, but it's mostly remote. Yeah.
And is it just the two of you, or do you have more people?
So we recently hired one engineer. He's in Vancouver, so he's on the West Coast. And then we also hired like a part-time finance and ops to help on the business side as well. So we're like 3.5 people now.
Nice. And mostly remote. So how do you celebrate the launch of your product on mainnet when you're remote?
We mostly just celebrate on Slack, and then like I will just meet
emojis.
Yeah, lots of emojis, lots of reactions, and lots of fire and party emojis. Yeah.
Very nice. Cool. All right. I think I've asked most of the questions I had for you. So thanks again for taking time to talk with me today. Where do people find more about, where do people find out more about Aspect?
Yeah, so they can visit us at aspect.co or follow us on Twitter, Discord, Telegram. So that's the best place to reach us.
Fantastic. Anything you want to mention?
Aspect is available on the mainnet. So if you want to play around with the Starknet ecosystem, feel free to use our platform.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, thank you very much, Henry. Thanks for the invitation.
Have a good day.
Thanks.